What's on your radar, Robby?
Well, Robert Reich is a former U.S. Secretary of Labor, having served under Bill Clinton from 1993 to 1997. He has taught public policy at UC Berkeley since 2006 and is generally one of the most influential progressive economic writers and commentators alive today. Many of Rising's viewers probably have a great deal of esteem for his opinions, Medicare for all, universal basic income, etc. But he attracted a lot of attention on social media yesterday for writing what I think is a particularly awful column that I think deserves a thorough debunking as it points to serious issues I have with progressive thinking. The article was titled, quote, "Elon Musk's vision for the internet is dangerous nonsense," and it ran in The Guardian. So Reich begins by condemning Vladimir Putin's authoritarianism, particularly how he hides the truth from the people of Russia by outlawing dissent, jailing protesters, prioritizing government propaganda over independent media, and so on. Reich then turns his attention to former President Donald Trump and says that the decisions by social media companies to ban the president were, quote, necessary to protect American democracy. But wait a minute, why does silencing one political viewpoint protect democracy? How is that any different than Putin saying his silencing of dissenters, for instance, is necessary to protect Russia? Reich doesn't seem to realize that he is condemning one kind of tyranny while lionizing another, which leads him into a very, very odd attack on Tesla CEO Elon Musk, who recently became the largest shareholder of Twitter after buying a 9% stake in the company. Musk was offered a spot on the board, but has declined it for reasons that aren't clear. We'll hopefully be learning more about that. But Musk has also expressed misgivings about Twitter's treatment of dissenting views on the platform. He's worried that the social media site, which serves a very important function as a place of discussion and debate among the political and journalistic classes, is increasingly unfriendly to free speech. Now, it's important to be clear that when we're talking about free speech in the Twitter context, we're talking about the principle of free speech, not free speech under the terms of the First Amendment, because social media sites are private companies, and the First Amendment protects their right actually to set whatever moderation policies they want. So the First Amendment is not and cannot be cited as a defense by anyone who is shadow banned or deplatformed, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, anywhere else. What we possess under the First Amendment is a right to criticize that bad behavior among those private corporations, to call out hypocrisy, to protest that singling out dissenting political speech for special punishment is a bad way to run an online platform. That's what I think, that's what Musk thinks, that's what many independent voices on both the left and the right have come to think. But not Robert Reich, apparently. He writes, quote, "Will Musk use his clout to let Trump back on? I fear he will. Musk has long advocated a libertarian vision of an uncontrolled internet. That vision is dangerous rubbish. There's no such animal. There never will be. In Musk's vision of Twitter and the internet, he'd be the wizard behind the curtain, projecting on the world screen a fake image of a brave new world empowering everyone. In reality, that world would be dominated by the richest and most powerful people in the world who wouldn't be accountable to anyone for facts, truth, science, or the common good. That's Musk's dream, and Trump's and Putin's, and the dream of every dictator, strongman, demagogue, modern-day robber baron on Earth. For the rest of us, it would be a brave new nightmare." End quote. So Reich, unfortunately, is deeply confused here. The libertarian vision of an uncontrolled internet is not the dream of dictators. Dictators want a controlled internet. Dictators like Putin want a controlled internet. What Reich is advocating is a controlled internet, and he likes the people who currently control it, I guess. The sort of progressive-minded moderators who don't want people to read about the Black Lives Matter Foundation spending their millions to buy up real estate rather than promote change, or about Hunter Biden's misdeeds. All of these things were hidden on Facebook, for instance, and an internet where Facebook hides the truth from users. Now that is a controlled internet. It's just one controlled by people Reich approves of. Musk appears to want something entirely different, a social media site where the gatekeepers don't try to suppress information. Instead, they let the users decide what to think and what to believe. Under this vision, people will frequently encounter information that is wrong. That's true. But they will also be free to judge for themselves, and we'd run less risk as a society of having a truth vigorously suppressed from public discussion because it embarrasses someone in power. Recall that for months, Facebook refused to allow users to talk about the lab leak theory on the platform. Now that policy has changed, as the lab leak theory has enough mainstream credibility and plausibility that even they can't deny it. That's the risk. We blind ourselves to the truth when we try that vigorously to stamp out lies. Reich is not alone in preferring things the way they are currently. Ellen K. Powell, the former CEO of Reddit, wrote in an op-ed for the Washington Post that Elon Musk's vision of free speech will be bad for Twitter. It will be bad for Twitter, she writes, because Musk wants to let more people speak on Twitter without fear of censorship. Progressives like Reich and like Powell should just admit they don't like free speech. They must not frame their dismissal of the concept as a sort of rejection of tyranny. It's the opposite. It's an embrace of tyranny, of a kind of tyranny that is popular in both Russia and China, the U.S.'s main political, social, and economic rivals. Russia and China don't want their citizens saying whatever they want on social media. Elon Musk does. That's the difference between an uncontrolled libertarian ethos for the internet and the ethos of the censors. So this piece that he wrote for The Guardian was getting a lot of criticism on Twitter because I don't really care for Robert Reich anyway. I didn't go in thinking this is going to be any worse than what I usually read from him, but it actually was worse. Weirdly comparing Elon Musk to like Putin, but they do or they want opposite things. Putin does command dictatorial control over the internet in Russia, and we all think that's bad, or pretty much everyone thinks that's bad. And Elon Musk is saying that's bad, and I don't get it.
Yeah, I think you're right. There is a pretty significant blind spot among liberals and some leftists. I mean, Reich occupies this kind of liminal zone between the broad Bernie left, who does advocate for these social policies that are enormously popular, and a more, I would say, true leftist cohort that would agree with you. And that agrees with you in part because we have been the subject of so much of the censorship that has come under the more liberal Mark Zuckerberg-y, Ellen Powell regimes. So it is frustrating for him not to see the hypocrisy there. It's also a little odd because when I clicked on the article, I presumed he was going to be concerned that Elon Musk was going to be censoring the internet along the lines that would be in the interest of Elon Musk and all of the corporate, and then I was going to obviously agree. And this was an interesting take, but I do appreciate that we're having this conversation in a bipartisan way now, because so many folks on the left are now having really substantive conversations about joining Rumble and joining Rockfin, because the shadow banning has gotten so insane, because the various people who've been pulled off the internet, the RT ban, even this show was pulled off the internet recently.
We had our trouble with YouTube, Right,
and people, their livelihoods depend on these kinds of things. There's no stability. And of course, the substantive news value is the most important thing at issue here. So I can't disagree with you on this one, I got to say.
Good to hear. That's good to hear. Yeah, and I take umbrage every time like libertarian is used pejoratively because I self-describe that way very obviously. Whatever, you can have disagreements with libertarianism, but don't describe like a controlled internet like he was saying an uncontrolled internet, but what he actually meant was a controlled internet as libertarian. Like, no, I'm not for this. And just because I don't think there are great government solutions on the table doesn't mean I'm satisfied with every moderation policy that comes out of social media. You know, if there was a really good idea for here's what the government regulation would be to solve a lot of our free speech concerns on social media, I would listen.
Yeah.
I would be willing to consider it, but no one has really proposed that thing. And a lot of the things that is Section 230 reform, just breaking up the companies, they're satisfying if your only goal is to like punish and destroy and just break these things. I want to make the landscape for speech better on these platforms. And I don't really see, I see like there's a step 1 and then a step 3 and the step 2 doesn't.
Yeah, no, and a lot of the Section 230 reforms, a lot of the reforms that say we'll treat the hosts as moderators, as editors, and make them responsible for the editorial content of the site, really ignores how that disproportionately benefits big sites that have the financial backing to be able to process all of the information. If you're Facebook, if you're Twitter, then perhaps you can hire enough people to do the kind of moderation that would shield you from liability. If you're a smaller provider and you're responsible for every comment and every like and everything, you're going to go down. You're going to get sued and you're going to go down, and that is going to limit the capacity or limit the avenues for speech on the internet, which is not the goal.
Which is why, in fact, that Facebook supports that very reform. Twitter does not support it because they hire currently fewer moderators than Facebook. Facebook has an army of moderators. They're like, yeah, make everyone responsible for speech. We'll kill our competitors.
Yeah.
So it's important to be aware of.
I think it's largely also just Trump derangement syndrome. The Trump cancellation off TDS. Twitter, I think, just messed with a lot of people's minds because they could not get themselves to oppose it just because of Trump bad. And I get it, Trump bad.
Trump bad, Cheeto Hitler, etc.
But you got to be able to think a little bit more broadly than that.
I can always diagnose TDS immediately if someone refers to Trump as Drumpf. instead. That's the easy.
Are people still doing that?
That's the spot check for do you have a temperature? Do you have you lost taste and smell? Did you call him Drumpf? Yeah, TDS.
Well, they say in the legal profession, hard cases make bad law, and I kind of feel like that's going on with Donald Trump. And I hope people figure out a way. I do think there's probably a category of, problem, of misinformation, if you will. Even that term is so loaded these days. That we would have to come up with some way to address. But every instance that we've seen so far have not really weighted the scales to a place where I would be willing to restrict speech in any respect for what?
Right.
Hunter Biden's laptop? Lab leak theory?
Right.
Show me the instance where we feel really good about the censorship that we've done.
Right, they're just embarrassing in hindsight. They're horribly embarrassing in
Right.
hindsight that they made those calls.
Right.
So. But I'm looking forward to your radar coming up next.